Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today I'm going to do a bit of a follow-up, a sequel to the video from Reno I did about aviation watches. Do have a look back because you kind of need to watch that to kind of get the most out of this one. I discussed the history of pilot watches. I went to Reno, saw some insane stunts, planes. I was there with the Fortis team, and I concentrated on watches from $1,000 to I think it's $4,000, the most underrated Swiss-made pieces. This time, however, and there was a lot of people, oh, where was the Airman? Where was this watch? Where was Sinn? Blah, blah, blah. Well, this time we're doing it doesn't matter where it's made, and under $1,000. So most likely, those watches are going to be in this list. Oh, and I should do wristwatch check. I'm wearing a Dan Henry 1964 with that lovely Aston Martin DB5 engraving on the back. Before we get into the top 10, I'm not going to go into the minutiae of every single, millimeter and material. I will put up specs on the screen because I want to talk or focus more about what's important about the watches rather than getting bogged down and making this an hour long. I'm already rabbiting on. So what else should I mention? Well, I'm only going to recommend watches I've seen, held, experienced in the flesh. I say this every time, but it's essential, guys. I see so many people recommending watches they've never reviewed or they never experienced. How can you do that? You don't really know a watch until you've worn it. After all, experience is the best education in life. Oh yeah, and very important, I'm only going to include one watch per brand, because otherwise it will be like Seiko, Seiko, Citizen, Seiko, Seiko, Citizen, Fortis, Okay, number 10. Now, I was going to put the Sinn 556A in here, but unfortunately, it's a smidgen over $1,000. It's $1,080. I'm going to mention it because if you can stretch that $80, it's a beautiful, clean, classic design from a brand that has achieved so much, founded after all by Helmut Sinn, a former World War II fighter pilot. I think he was a fighter pilot. I'm pretty sure he was a fighter pilot. So incredible quality. I highly recommend it. But I'm going to put the Fortis Spacematic. Now, Fortis, as we discussed in part 1, amazing brand, incredible legacy, and I've said this a million times, but it's so true, the most underrated Swiss brand of all time. Their achievements, I'm not going to repeat myself, but yeah, the Spacematic, the original was based in the 60s, worn by Gemini astronauts in NASA during testing. It never went to space, but it was robust. And then Fortis came out with a new version, which is very kind of retro. I've reviewed it, have a look back. Beautiful satinized case, ETA in there, the day-date complication, functional 40 millimeters, premium materials. I've been to the Fortis factory. They're not messing around. And obviously they have a wealth of experience because they make the cosmonauts. So when it comes to making watches proven in space, the Spacematic, the name is well deserved. Number 9 is the Laco Aachen, another watch I've reviewed. Now, Laco, of course, goes without saying, they're one of the big 5 that made the original Fliegers during World War II. So they bring authenticity to the table. Now, what I really respect about them is the fact that they offer the historically accurate, modern, contemporary versions, but those are above $1,000. They did a very clever thing last year, and this is why I reviewed it. They made a budget version and they put a Miyota. Some people did complain, oh, it's a little bit too expensive for a Miyota. Listen, for around $400, you're getting the authenticity of the name. Second of all, it's manufactured in Germany, in Pforzheim, which is, the costs of that alone must be, I'm surprised they make any money. They have these stunning dial, you can get the blue one, the Aachen Blue, which I reviewed, choice of 39 millimeters or 42, so all wrists are taken care of. Yeah, okay, the Miyota's nothing to write home about, but I think by offering historically important B dials, Flieger from the makers of the original, I think it's incredible value for money. Stunningly elegant pieces, highly legible, yeah. Okay, number 8, I wanted to put something a little bit different. I'm going to put a Swatch in there. Now, I recently saw this on the wrist of a friend, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's the System 51, but this is the YIS403 Irony. What they essentially did, I mean, if you're not familiar with what the System 51 is, Swatch don't need no introduction. I mean, they were started in 1983, a response by the Swiss industry to make something fun, affordable, to kind of get back in the game after being so hurt from the quartz crisis, of course. So Swatch was revolutionary. Swatch, it stands actually for second watch. 2013, they revolutionized and made horological history by introducing the System 51. The name derives from the 51 components. It's hermetically sealed, made completely start to finish, entirely Swiss made by machines. It's an automatic movement with a staggering 80-hour power reserve for very affordable prices. The Irony is only $200. You can get it on Amazon, but as you can see, it takes direct inspiration from World War II Flieger dials. So it's a kind of quirky, cool look, but it's not the first time Swatch have done this. If you look back in the archives, they did the Nicholson, the GB705 in 1985. I don't know why it's called the Nicholson. Anything to do with Jack Nicholson? It'd be cool if it was, but anyway, so it's not the first time they've taken inspiration from Fliegers. So with the System 51, you're wearing a bit of horological history on your wrist. An important advance, it really is. It's going to be interesting to see what Swatch do next. At 7, I've decided to do something a little bit more unusual. The Seagull 1963. Now, I have reviewed this donkeys ago. Don't ask me when it was, but have a look back in the archives. This, believe it or not, is a pilot's watch. It was designed for the original. This is a reissue. It's a remake. It was designed for the Chinese Air Force in 1963, of course. But what is interesting is Seagull actually bought the machinery from Switzerland to make the old Venus 175 calibers, and took them to China. They make their own ST19, which is basically, it's a column wheel, manual wind chronograph, and you get these for a staggering $329. Amazing value for money. I mean, it's unheard of. The Swiss cannot compete at this level, but of course, trust the Chinese to be able to do it. Now, you can get it in a variety of sizes. Again, Long Island watches do sell these. One word of warning: they don't have the best quality control. I've heard a lot of horror stories about them going wrong, but if you're willing to, I think the value proposition here is still worthy to take a risk. I really do think so. Very classic, very 60s design. So it has a bi-compax layout, very tastefully done. You get an exhibition case back to enjoy that column wheel. The desire of every watch enthusiast, if you're into chronographs at least. Wonderful bit of mechanical engineering that you can actually see and enjoy. Next, we have an old favorite that I have reviewed many times, owned several times myself. This is the Marathon Navigator. Now, I included it because it's the only watch in the top 10 that is actually mil spec, worn by military. In fact, it was developed by Marathon Watch Company in 1986 as a request of the Kelly Air Force Base, designed specifically to deal with high altitude flying. Therefore, that's why the choice of materials. It also suffers criticism because it's a very affordable watch. We're talking about $250. It's made in a specialized fiber shell case, so very lightweight. We got a Swiss Ronda in there. Marathon need no introduction. They've made watches for pretty much every single conflict going back to the turn of the century. You can get special versions for the Dudavan Israeli paratroopers, elite paratroopers. There is US military ones. There are I think several different color options, incredibly accurate. We get a bidirectional bezel with a second time zone as well. What I love about these, they use tritium gas tubes, so you got this isotope of hydrogen, meaning they won't dull down. They don't need light, they're just perpetually glowing. Well, not perpetually, they run out, I think after about 15 years or something like that. Very cool kind of asymmetrical case. I love the blacked out look of it, of the fiber shell. It gives it a very tool-tastic, no nonsense. I mean, this is the real deal when it comes to military watches, you know? I actually gave mine away as a gift. I regret that. I'm probably gonna buy another one. Very cool watches indeed. At number 5, we had to make this list with a Hamilton. I didn't put a Hamilton in the previous video because I knew it was going to be in this one. Now there's a few Hamiltons. I've owned the X-Patrol, the 7750 based Valjoux chronograph, amazing watch. That's a smidgen over 1,000. There's the X-Wind with the world's first inner rotating bezel to calculate crosswinds. Very unique. Again, that's slightly over 1,000. So what was I going to go with? Of course, it has to be the Cooper watch from Interstellar, which also I've reviewed. Now, they have come out with the Murph watch recently. Unfortunately, it's 42 millimeters, smidgen too large for me. I actually still think the Cooper is the best watch out of the two because you get the day-date complication, wonderful Flieger B-style type dial with an amazing detail applied numerals, these semi-skeletonized hands. The case is very Hamilton. It still has those curves, those Cadillac style curves, because of course Hamilton has a, well, it was predominantly an American brand longer than it was a Swiss brand. ETA in there, automatic. You can get the more affordable quartz version if you want to stay under $500. One of my favorite details is how they've put the day and the date symmetrically, you know. Absolutely gorgeous sunburst effect. It's got an elegance to it, but at the same time, it's still a tool, you know, still does its job. Yeah, I love it. I reviewed it. I don't need to bang on about it. You know how good it is. Okay, number 4, it's Citizen. Now, normally I would recommend the NaviHawk, which I've reviewed. I've recommended a million times in different videos. However, this time I'm going to put the NaviHawk to one side and recommend the NaviHawk, which is its bigger Ani-Digi kind of cousin. You get so much more bang for your buck because you've got the added complications. There's several different versions from around $400 to $500 to $600. Have a look at the eBay, the Japanese market especially, because you can get some very Navitimer-esque versions that you just don't see internationally. I don't know why. I guess it's a bit like Seiko. They keep a lot of the good stuff for themselves. You've got Eco Drive in there, world time, the backlight for the digital displays, super accurate, atomic timekeeping. You don't have to worry about batteries or anything like that. Eco Drive's amazing. I've actually owned some of these NaviHawks long before I had a channel. I love them. I was much larger then, so that is a point to mention. They are big, they are huge, they're complicated, they're big, they're busy, but fun. It's the kind of do-it-all pilot's watch. Why I've gone with this particular Citizen is because, and I speak from experience of owning many kind of vintage Citizen Ani-Digi watches. They were always nipping at the heels. Okay, so Seiko definitely innovated and definitely brought that to the table, but I also think that Citizen are actually a little bit better quality in the construction and finishing than Seiko. Beautifully made Japanese watches that just have a ton of functionality. Number 3, we've got Stowa. I can't make this list without them. Unfortunately, many of their historically accurate World War II Fliegers, because you know they've been making Fliegers since the 1940s. They're one of the big 5 like Laco that we talked about earlier. I've added this. This is a newcomer. I saw one of these on the wrist of a friend of mine and I was absolutely blown away. It's an award-winning watch. We are talking about the Stowa Verus. I think it's pronounced Verus. It's 40 millimeters. They're able to produce it more affordably because they've got a more basic automatic ETA in there, although you can have it customized. I've bought from Stowa's website. It's fantastic. Stowa are very much forward thinking in terms of their website design and how they sell watches. Amazing quality, made in the Black Forest of Germany. Again, like Laco that we mentioned earlier, they bring authenticity and legitimacy because it's one of the big five, you know, historically important. This one is a modern twist. They've cleaned up the design. It's got a lovely symmetrical placement of the date, slightly different numerals, amazing loom. It's a classic Flieger A style, but touch of more modern. You can specify on the website if you want to have date or no date. Very functional, very clean, but with the DNA of the legendary Stovers still in it. So it's a nice modern twist. And if you want to spend more, you can have the top grade version, so a little bit more decoration. But the quality of construction from Stowa, as you've seen from the many Stowa reviews on I think I've reviewed 3 of them now, so I don't need to, maybe I don't need to review this, but yeah, it speaks for itself. That inherent quality you get with German manufacturing, it's certainly, you feel it here. Number 2, it is the Glycine Airman. It could only be, and for, you know, $500 to $1,000, I would go for the DC4, which is very mid-century design, vintage aesthetic, accurate to the original. Or you can go for the modern base 22, which I've reviewed several versions of. I love the luminous dial version especially. It's an unapologetic tool watch there to do a job. The Glycine gets so far up the list because it was revolutionary. In 1953, a year before the Rolex GMT, it added the ability to track a second time zone with that lockable bezel. Obviously, it added a GMT hand slightly later. So incredibly important, worn in Vietnam. Glycine, great Swiss brand. They have been bought by Invicta. And there is a big misconception that now they are part of Invicta or under that umbrella that they're going to go massive and gargantuan and loud. And in fact, actually, some of their more ostentatious designs were already on the market before Invicta bought them. So yeah, it's a load of hogwash. Some of the Invicta influence is rubbing off, but you know what? They've come down in price. You're getting the same Swiss-made quality for less. It's still made in the same factory. And I don't see the issue here because you know what? I prefer Invicta bought them rather than them ceasing to make watches and ceasing to exist, right? Which would you prefer? It's still the icon. It's still a classic. It still changed the game back in 1953. Choice of sizes, a choice of designs, a choice of cases, automatics, ETA based. There's even a quartz one. So yeah, how can I not include the Airman? What is at number 1? Well, you know what's at number 1. It's flighty. There it is, the Flightmaster. Okay, you know what? Let's mention the SNK, the Seiko 5, the SNK 809 here, because if you got 50, 60, 70 bucks, this is a great Flieger B style. There is another reference, I forget the number, but there's a 42mm version Seiko 5 as well for a little bit more. Seiko have a history of making aviation watches since the kamikaze pilot watches of World War II. When I did the history of the flighty video, I think it was at the beginning of the year, around just after Christmas, I discovered that how important Seiko is. Well, for a start, in 1983, they made the first quartz analog chronograph, which was then worn by James Bond. I think it was the mid-80s. It was actually issued to RAF pilots. So all of that lineage is in it wasn't a Flightmaster yet. The Flightmaster name came a little bit later. In fact, go and have a look at that video. But you get that legacy in the Flightmaster. Seiko's incredibly important when it comes to quartz and quartz chronographs and of course pilot watches. So the Flighty has all of that, not to mention the screw down lockable pushers, 200 meters water resistance, an alarm, second time zone, the Seiko loom, it's 40mm. Now they are creeping up in value. I bought my first flighty for just a smidgen over $100. That's not going to happen anymore. Nowadays they're closer to 300. Is it still worth it? Absolutely yes. It is unequivocally pure class, always will be. Never selling mine. I've sold it, rebought it I think twice now. It's not going to happen again. Let's not neglect to mention the other flight aviation inspired watches Seiko do. But anyway, that's it guys. Let me know your suggestions. I'd love to hear what you recommend at this price range under $1,000 in the comments below. Let's try and help out as many people as we can. I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful, and as always guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao. Now before I go guys, I just want to quickly tell you about this extremely cool app that Watchbox have launched. This is my own personal go-to app for everything watch related. Using the app, you can keep track of the real-time value of your watch collection. You can store watches in your digital watch box and even try on watches using an augmented reality. So don't miss out, and please go to the App Store and download it today. You can access all of my latest videos right there in the app itself. And if you haven't already, please follow me on the official Urban Gentry Instagram and of course the Facebook UGWC. But most importantly of all, keep it positive, onwards and upwards.